All right, so have you ever thought about what really makes a good leader? I mean, you're in a tough spot, you need people to come together. Who do you want in charge? Someone who just yells or someone who can make you want to push further?
Hmm, that's a good question.
Well, today we're going to deep dive into leadership using this leadership presentation as our guide.
Ooh, sounds interesting. I'm ready to dissect this.
Awesome. Whether you're like running a team at work or just trying to get your cat to listen, this stuff is super useful.
Yeah, for sure. Leadership pops up everywhere. Like sometimes it feels like some folks just got eat it, born leaders.
Right. But this presentation, it breaks it down, shows it's not magic, it's people skills and knowing the right moves.
Right, totally.
Okay, so first things first, this presentation starts by defining what leadership actually is. And it's not about being the boss, it's about influencing a group to go for a shared goal, getting people excited to work together, not because they have to, but because they want to.
Exactly. It's about that motivation. And what's really cool is how the presentation talks about all the amazing stuff leaders have done by connecting with people on a deeper level, like
Right.
figuring out what makes folks tick, then using that to achieve something bigger than themselves.
It's almost like unlocking people's potential.
Yes, that's a great way to put it.
But here's where it gets a little tricky. We use leader and manager all the time, like they're the same thing. But this
Mm.
presentation says, hold up, there's a difference.
Oh, yeah, and it's a big one. It's like,
Mm.
think of
Yeah.
a ship. The leader sets the course, gets everyone on board with the destination, but the manager, they're focused on keeping that ship running smoothly, navigating, handling the day-to-day. Both are important, but different roles.
I like that, the ship analogy. So leadership is about vision, where you're headed. Management is more about the HOW, the five functions.
Yeah,
Planning, organizing, staffing, directing, and controlling.
exactly. It's a partnership, really. You need both for things to work well.
Totally. And to make it even clearer, the presentation uses a table to break it all down, like comparing leadership and managership across all sorts of stuff, where their authority comes from, what their approach is like, the skills needed for each. Super helpful to see it laid out like that.
Right. It's those little details that make it click. Like a leader might get their authority from respect they've earned, while a manager's is more official from their position.
Makes sense. And leadership often means looking ahead, being proactive, while management is dealing with what's right in front of them, keeping things on track.
Exactly.
Okay, so now let's get into how leadership actually works. The presentation says there are 6 key functions, like a recipe for success: planning, organizing, motivating, coordinating, representing, and controlling.
Ooh, that's a lot, like a whole system.
It is. So first up, planning. It all starts with the vision, right?
Yeah.
Setting clear goals, figuring out the strategies, basically creating the roadmap.
Oh, yeah, I gotta know where you're going.
Exactly. Then there's organizing, putting the pieces in place, structuring the
Hmm.
team, assigning roles, making sure everyone knows how they fit in.
Makes sense. And then you gotta get people pumped, right? Motivating them.
And it's more than just rewards and punishments. It's about figuring out what makes people tick, what they want to achieve,
Mm.
and inspiring them to bring their best.
It's like creating an environment where everyone feels valued, like
Mhm.
they can contribute something meaningful. The presentation even mentions Maslow's hierarchy of needs here, like remembering that people are motivated by a bunch of different things, not just one thing.
It's like psychology meets leadership. You're not just telling people what to do, you're understanding how they work.
Exactly. And we can't forget coordination, making sure everyone's on the same page, working smoothly together, like a well-oiled machine.
Totally. Then you have representation, being the face of the group, communicating the vision to the outside world, building relationships.
Right, like being an ambassador for the team.
Exactly. And lastly, controlling. Not in a micromanaging way, but making sure things are on track, being ready to adjust if needed, like the captain steering the ship through rough waters.
Keeping it all steady.
Okay, so before we jump into the different types of leaders, I want to give a shout out to London Heartbeat Z Academy in the UK. They're doing awesome work with healthcare education, offering over 140 courses to help people level up their skills.
Wow, that's amazing. Especially in healthcare, where things are always changing.
Right. And it connects to what we're talking about today. Leadership in healthcare is crucial, whether you're a doctor leading a team or someone researching a new treatment.
Totally. Inspiring people, making tough calls, always aiming for the best.
Exactly. So if you're in healthcare or just want to learn more, check out London Heartbeat Z Academy. Find them on Facebook, Instagram, Spotify, and YouTube. And hit that subscribe button so you don't miss discussions like this.
Yeah, it's a goldmine of info. Who knows, you might discover your own leadership potential.
Now, back to our deep dive. The presentation moves on to types of leaders, and it's like a whole spectrum, each with pros and cons.
It's fascinating, isn't it? How different styles can work in different situations.
Totally. So first, the autocratic leader, the classic command and control style. They decide, everyone else follows.
Right, top-down approach. Good when you need to act fast, like in a crisis or with a team that needs clear direction, but it can also squish creativity and make people resentful if they feel ignored.
Yeah, balance is key.
Oh.
Then there's participative leadership, all about collaboration and everyone having a say in decisions.
I like that one. More democratic, creates a good vibe, more ideas flowing, but it can take longer to reach decisions, which isn't always ideal.
True, true. Then we have the transactional leader. They set clear expectations, reward you when you meet them, like a you do this, I do that kind of deal.
Makes sense. Good for productivity, hitting targets, but it might not feel as fulfilling for folks who want more meaning in their work, you know?
All right, it's a bit more businesslike. But then we have the transformational leader. These are the visionaries, inspiring their teams to do incredible things, exceeding expectation.
Oh yeah, those are the ones that make you feel like you can do anything.
Exactly. They paint a picture of the future and you just want to be part of it. It's often linked to big, positive changes because everyone feels invested in the mission.
That's powerful.
Okay, and last but not least, the formal leader. Authority comes from their position, following the rules and structure.
Classic traditional approach.
Right, often seen in larger organizations. Keeps things orderly and stable, but maybe not as adaptable when things change quickly.
I see, I see.
All right, so we've got a good idea of the types of leaders. But what about what makes a leader truly good? Are there certain traits that set the great ones apart?
Ooh, that's the million-dollar question. And the presentation actually lays out 7 key traits that show up again and again in effective leaders. I'm curious to hear what they are.
Me too. Let's hear about these magic traits.
Okay, first up is being able to promote a compelling vision, like painting a picture of the future that gets people excited to join the journey. It's not just telling folks what to do, it's giving them a reason to believe in something bigger.
Makes sense. Got to get people on board with the WHY. What else?
Treating others well. Sounds basic, but you'd be surprised how many leaders mess this up. It's about respect, empathy, creating a positive environment.
Building trust, right?
Exactly. And here's a big one. Admitting mistakes. Nobody's perfect. And good leaders own up to their screw-ups. They don't blame others or hide stuff. They use it as a chance to learn and grow.
Takes guts to do that.
It does. And then there's taking action. Good ideas are great, but you gotta do something with them, make things happen, get results.
Walk the walk, not just talk the talk. What else?
Strong communication skills.
Yeah.
Super crucial. Being able to clearly explain your vision, listen to others, give good feedback.
Yeah, communication is key for everything. What else?
Knowing how to delegate. You can't do it all yourself. You gotta empower your team, give people responsibility, and trust them to deliver.
Utilizing everyone's strengths.
Exactly. And last but not least, making people feel valued, recognizing their contributions, celebrating wins, making everyone feel appreciated and respected.
Creating a sense of belonging, like their work actually matters.
Yes. These 7 traits, they paint a pretty clear picture of what makes a great leader.
They do. It's almost like a checklist you can use to see where you stand.
Right. But like with anything, there are different ways to look at leadership. And the presentation next talks about a model called the Managerial Grid. Have you heard of that one?
Managerial Grid. Vaguely.
Yeah.
Refresh my memory. What's it all about?
It's a cool way to visualize different leadership styles. It's based on 2 things, concern for people and concern for production. Imagine a graph. And depending on where a leader falls on these 2 axes, you get a sense of their style.
Interesting. So high concern for people, high concern for production. That sounds like the ideal leader, right?
You got it. The Managerial Grid actually identifies 5 different leadership styles, each a different combo of these 2 things. The impoverished style, for example, has low concern for both. It's like the bare minimum effort, just coasting along.
Okay. Doesn't sound very inspiring. What about the others?
Well, on the opposite end, there's the country club style, all about creating a happy workplace, even if it means sacrificing productivity, like fun and friends over getting stuff done.
Okay, 2 extremes. What about the middle ground?
There's the authority compliance style. They're focused on maximizing output, even if it means pushing people hard, very task-oriented, all about efficiency and control.
Gotcha. So we've got do the bare minimum, let's all be friends, and results at all costs. What about the other 2?
The middle-of-the-road style, you guessed it, tries to balance concern for people and production, but it can be a bit indecisive, not fully committing to either.
Makes sense. And finally, the ideal style, the top of the managerial grid.
That's team management. High concern for both people and production. These leaders understand that happy, engaged individuals are the key to amazing results. It's a win-win. Everyone feels valued and motivated.
That sounds like the sweet spot.
It is, and the managerial grid, it's a great tool for seeing how a leader style impacts the whole team and how well the organization does.
Absolutely. It's all about finding that balance where everyone thrives. This is already so insightful. I can't wait to see what else this presentation has to offer.
Me too. We're about to get into the fascinating world of leadership theories, but first, how about a quick break? We'll be back in a jiffy to keep this deep dive rolling.
Sounds good to me. See you all in a bit.
Welcome back. So we were talking about all those different ways to understand what makes a good leader, right? Like the trait approach, the situational one, and the behavioral approach.
Yeah, it's like having different lenses to look through, each one giving you a different perspective. And I like how the presentation doesn't just say, hey, these are perfect answers. It actually talks about the downsides of each approach, which I think is super helpful.
Totally. It's like, yeah, they're useful tools, but they're not going to solve every problem. Like with traits, it's great for spotting potential leaders based on their qualities, but sometimes those traits might not work so well in every situation.
Right? It's not just about the individual, it's about the context too. Like you could have someone with all the right traits, but if they're in a bad environment, they're not going to succeed.
Exactly. It's like a fish out of water. And then with the situational approach, it's all about adapting, right? But real life is messy. It's not always as clear-cut as those textbook examples.
True. It's not a simple formula you can just apply and expect magic to happen.
And what about the behavioral approach? What downsides does the presentation mention for that one? Well, it's great to focus on what people actually do, how they behave, and trying to learn new leadership behaviors. But changing habits takes time. It's not like flipping a switch.
Right. It's a process.
Exactly. And sometimes the stuff happening within an organization, like power struggles or money problems, can overshadow even the best leadership behaviors.
Makes sense. So there's no one-size-fits-all approach. But I think looking at all these different angles helps us see just how complex leadership really is.
Oh, absolutely. It's like having a multidimensional map. You need all those different views to truly understand the terrain. And speaking of navigating different terrains, the presentation then goes back to those specific leadership styles. Autocratic, participative, laissez-faire, and servant leadership.
Yeah, we touched on those before. What else does the presentation say about them?
Well, first, it reminds us that there's a video link in the presentation that can help us understand those styles even better. It's like a visual companion.
Cool. We should definitely check that out. But for now, let's stick with the presentation. What does it say about autocratic leadership?
It reminds us that it's all about control. The leader making decisions, often without much input from the team. It can work when you need to act fast, like in a crisis, or if you're working with folks who are new or inexperienced.
Yeah, I can see how that would be useful in certain situations. But like we talked about before, it can also kill creativity and make people feel resentful if they feel like their voices aren't heard.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between control and giving people freedom, and it really depends on the situation and the people you're working with.
Okay, that makes sense. What about participative leadership? What does the presentation add about that one?
It emphasizes that it's all about open communication, involving the team and decision-making, creating a sense of ownership and reaching those goals. It's like everyone working together to create something amazing.
I like that. It's not just one person calling all the shots.
Right, and the presentation talks about how this style can lead to people being more on board with decisions, more creative ideas, and a more positive work environment.
Cool, cool. So if autocratic leadership is like a solo performance, participative is more like an ensemble.
Yeah,
Everyone's playing a part.
that's a great way to put it. Now let's talk about laissez-faire leadership. What does the presentation say about that hands-off approach?
Well, if I remember correctly, it's about giving people a lot of freedom to manage their own work and make their own decisions.
You got it. It's about trusting people to be self-directed. The leader might offer support and guidance, but they mostly step back and let the team do their thing.
It seems like that would only work with a really skilled and motivated team, people who are already comfortable taking initiative and working independently.
You're absolutely right. It's definitely not for every situation, but when you have the right people, it can be super effective.
And lastly, what about servant leadership? What's the presentation's take on that style?
It goes deeper into that idea, explaining that it's not just about being nice or helpful. It's a whole different way of thinking about leadership. It's about putting the needs of others first, even before your own.
So it's kind of like turning the traditional idea of leadership upside down.
Exactly. It's about empowering others, helping them grow, and creating a culture of service and collaboration.
That sounds pretty powerful, but also like it takes a lot of dedication and selflessness.
Definitely. And the presentation talks about how important active listening is and empathy and building strong relationships with your team.
So it's more about being a guide, a mentor, than just a boss.
Exactly. It's interesting how the presentation even mentions some of the benefits of servant leadership, like stronger trust and loyalty within the team, more engagement and motivation, and better overall performance.
Sounds like a win-win. So many different leadership styles to consider.
There are. And now, to add another layer to all of this, let's look at something called the leadership continuum theory. It basically says that most leadership styles fall somewhere between those two extremes of autocratic and democratic. It's like a spectrum with different shades of leadership depending on the situation and the people involved.
That makes sense. It's not always black and white, right?
Exactly. The presentation talks about how valuable this theory is because it encourages leaders to be more flexible, more adaptable. It's not about picking one style and sticking to it no matter what. It's about realizing that different approaches might be better depending on what's going on.
Right, like having different tools in your toolbox. You wouldn't use a hammer to tighten a screw.
Exactly. And the presentation even talks about the pros and cons of the leadership continuum theory, which is helpful to understand its strengths and weaknesses.
Okay, let's start with the good stuff. What are some of the advantages?
Well, it gives leaders more options for how to approach a task or a project. It's not just about being the boss or the friend. It's about recognizing that there are different levels of involvement that might work better depending on the situation.
So it's a more nuanced way of thinking about leadership.
Exactly. And because it considers things like how much time you have, how complex the task is, and the skills and experience of the people involved, it can lead to making better decisions.
Okay, that makes sense. What about the limitations? What downsides does the presentation mention?
One thing is, it mostly focuses on that first step of assigning a task. It doesn't really give you a guide for how to manage that task all the way through, like checking on progress, giving feedback, making changes along the way.
Ah, so it's not a complete project management system.
Right. It's more of a tool for deciding how much the leader should be involved at the beginning. And it also assumes that the leader has all the info they need to figure out the best approach. But sometimes things are more complicated than they seem.
Yeah, you might think you know what you're dealing with, but then it turns out to be totally different. Good reminder to be flexible and adapt, even when you're using a model like this.
Absolutely. It's all about using these tools as guidelines, not strict rules.
Hmm.
Now, the presentation shifts gears and focuses on those qualities that really make a leader effective, the things that set the great ones apart.
This is where it gets really interesting. We talked about styles and theories, but it all boils down to what makes someone truly great at leading and inspiring others.
Totally. And the presentation makes a good point. It's not just about being naturally charismatic or relying on your title. It's about actively working on specific qualities and committing to becoming a better leader.
So it's not something you just RE, it's something you DO.
Right. And the presentation highlights that effective leadership leads to all sorts of good things, like better teamwork, happier employees, and a more successful work environment overall.
Yeah, like a chain reaction of positive stuff.
Exactly. So let's dig into those specific qualities. First up is decisiveness. Good leaders can gather info, weigh the options, and make decisions, even when things are uncertain.
So being able to act confidently and quickly, even under pressure.
Exactly. They don't get stuck overthinking everything. They know that sometimes you just have to go with your gut and make a move.
Makes sense. And along with being decisive, the presentation talks about being goal-oriented. Good leaders have a clear vision of what they want to achieve, and they come up with plans to make it happen.
Yeah, they're not just dreamers, they're doers too. And they don't just delegate and sit back, they lead by example. They do what they expect others to do.
That's important, walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Exactly. And it's not just going through the motions either. Effective leaders are passionate about what they do, and that passion rubs off on others.
I can see that. Enthusiasm is contagious. But passion alone isn't enough, right? The presentation also mentions humility.
Right. You might think humility isn't something you'd see in a leader, but it's actually super powerful. Humble leaders create an environment where everyone feels valued and respected.
It's about admitting you don't know everything, Being open to learning from others.
Exactly, and being willing to admit when you're wrong. The presentation highlights that as a key trait. Good leaders own up to their mistakes and use them as opportunities to learn.
Takes courage to do that.
It does, and it builds trust and respect. And along with accountability, the presentation talks about giving credit where it's due. Good leaders recognize the contributions of others and celebrate wins as a team.
Yeah, that's so important for keeping morale high. It shows you appreciate people and their hard work.
Totally. And good leaders are also dedicated to helping their team members grow and develop. They give them chances to learn new things, get mentored, and advance in their careers.
It's like investing in your people.
Exactly. And they do all of this while being confident in themselves and their vision.
Yeah, confidence is contagious too. It makes people believe in the leader and what they're trying to achieve.
Absolutely. And finally, good leaders are fearless when it comes to challenges. They're willing to take risks, embrace change, and push the boundaries.
Like pioneers.
Yes. And the presentation reminds us that while these qualities are important for individual leaders, organizations also play a part in creating an environment where good leadership can grow.
It's like creating the right conditions for a plant to thrive.
Exactly. Organizations need to create a culture that values leadership development, gives people the power to take initiative, and provides the resources and support that leaders need to succeed.
So it's a two-way street. Wow, this deep dive has been amazing. We've learned so much about leadership, from the big picture to the small details.
It has. We've looked at styles, theories, and all those qualities that make a leader truly effective.
I feel like we've gained some seriously valuable insights.
Me too. It's been inspiring, and I hope our listeners feel motivated to continue their own leadership journey.
Yeah. Whether you're leading a team at work, a project, or just working on being a more influential person in your life, there's always more to learn and new ways to grow.
All right, so are we ready to unpack those key traits that really make a leader stand out?
Totally ready. We've talked about all the styles and theories, but now it's like, okay, what makes someone truly great at leading and inspiring people?
You know, the presentation makes a point of saying good leadership isn't just about being charismatic or relying on your title.
Right. It's not just a personality thing.
Yeah, it's about actually working on certain qualities and always trying to grow as a leader.
It's active, not passive.
Exactly. And the presentation points out how effective leadership is linked to all sorts of good outcomes, like teams getting more done, people being happier at work, and the whole work environment becoming more positive and successful.
It's like a leader's influence can spread out and have a positive impact on everything around them.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So let's get into those specific qualities the presentation talks about.
Okay, hit me with them.
So first up, decisiveness. Good leaders can look at the info, weigh the options, and make decisions, even when things are up in the air.
So being able to act confidently, even when there's pressure.
Exactly. They don't get bogged down by overthinking. They know sometimes you got to trust your gut, make a call, and move forward.
It's like that saying, better to have tried and failed than to have never tried at all.
Exactly. And along with that, the presentation talks about being goal-oriented. Good leaders have a clear idea of what they want to achieve, and then they actually make plans to get there.
So they're not just dreamers. They're planners and doers too.
Yeah. And they don't just tell people what to do, they lead by example. They actually embody those behaviors and values they expect from their team.
That walk the talk thing, right? People can spot a fake from a mile away.
Totally. And it's not just going through the motions. Good leaders are actually passionate about what they do. And that energy, it's contagious.
Yeah, you can feel that excitement. It makes you want to get on board.
Absolutely. But the presentation also mentions that it's not just about passion. Humility is important too.
Humility. That's interesting. You don't always think of that as a leadership quality.
Right.
Yeah.
But the presentation makes a good point. Humble leaders create an environment where everyone feels respected and valued because they're not all, I know everything my way or the highway.
Makes sense. It's about recognizing that you don't have all the answers, being open to learning from others, and valuing different perspectives.
Exactly. And also, being able to admit when you're wrong, that's another key trait the presentation highlights. Good leaders don't try to hide their mistakes.
They take responsibility.
Yes, and that builds trust and respect from the team. And along with accountability, there's also the importance of giving credit where it's due. Recognizing the contributions of others, celebrating wins as a team.
That's huge for morale.
Yeah.
It shows you actually appreciate people's hard work.
Definitely. Creates a much more positive vibe. And good leaders are also committed to helping their team members learn and grow, giving them opportunities for training, mentorship, all that good stuff.
Investing in their people, basically.
Exactly. And they do all of this while being confident in themselves and their vision.
It's like that confidence can really inspire others, make them believe in the leader and the mission.
Absolutely. And finally, good leaders aren't afraid of challenges. They take risks, embrace change, push the limits.
Always looking for ways to improve and grow.
Yeah, and the presentation reminds us that while all these qualities are super important for individual leaders, organizations also need to create a supportive environment for good leadership to develop.
So it's about the whole system working together.
Exactly. Organizations need to value leadership development, give people the freedom to take initiative, and provide the resources and support leaders need to be successful.
That makes sense. Wow, we've really explored a lot about leadership in this deep dive.
We have. We've covered styles, theories, and all those key qualities that make a leader truly effective.
I feel like we've all gained some really valuable insights from this.
Me too. It's been really inspiring, and I hope everyone listening feels encouraged to continue on their own leadership journey, wherever that takes them.
Absolutely. Whether you're leading a team, a project, or just working on being a more influential person, there's always something new to learn and ways to grow. It's a lifelong journey, and with effort and dedication, anyone can develop those skills and qualities that make a great leader.
That's a great way to wrap things up. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep leading.
Thanks for listening, everyone. And a big thanks to London Heartbeat's Z Academy for their support. Be sure to check out their incredible healthcare courses and follow them on social media for more great insights. See you all next time for another deep dive.